Hi everyone, I'm super excited to host Mark Seeger, founder and co-CEO of Glydways. Glydways is reinventing public transit from first principles. Autonomous on-demand pods on dedicated guideways that move more people than rail in half of the space at 90% less cost. Thanks a lot, Mark, for being on the show.
Larry, it's great to meet you. It's great to be here. And to your viewers and listeners, welcome to what I hope will be a good discussion. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Mark, Apple in 1999, biodegradable plastics, electric motorcycles, low cost AC, then mass transit. Like, walk us through your career journey.
Yeah, there are some other chapters in there as well, though I'm glad you did not mention them. Look, I think my journey started out as a lot of people's do in terms of the technical field. As a child, I always took home appliances apart and tried to put them back together, sometimes successfully, not all the time, and sometimes frustrating my parents with that. But that I always wanted to learn how things work, and it's a very typical story of anybody who entered the engineering fields, which I did. I went to school to become an engineer, mechanical and electrical. But with that, I also studied business because one of the things I wanted to learn is what are the business models or the economics that pay for the things that we build and design and use. I always thought that was very interesting. And so when I came out of school, yeah, I did a lot of technical work, a lot of engineering work, product development of one kind or another, and technology development. But to me, the theme was always an overlap with business to make sure that the thing I wanted to work on would be able to be affordable or could pay for itself. So that's sort of the business sustainability mindset of it. Very, very simple idea. But I had another thought too, which is that, I'm 46 years old. So I was born in the late 70s and grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And around that time, there was a lot of discussion and for me, education around climate change, environmental pollution, and sort of that was kind of coming up as I was growing up. And so when I left university, I left with this idea, and it wasn't really well formed back then. This is post rationalization a little bit. But I left with this idea that says we have so many problems in our world that make our civilization unsustainable. Anyone who has a skill, in my case, engineering, we have a responsibility to apply that to solving any one of those problems that we face: technical, social, environmental, economic. There's many, many problems one can choose from. And so for me, the through line largely has been how can we bring new products and services to the market that are needed, that use less resource, not just cost less, but use less energy, less carbon, less material, and so on and so on. And I think I've stuck with that same idea when it came to mobility, which is what I do now. I work at a company that I founded called Glydways. And Glydways is you introduced us as a new mass transit system, which is correct. I like to think of it a little differently as Glydways builds flow networks, which is a new form of mobility designed around continuous movement instead of traffic. And where that concept came from, and this has been the last 11 years of my life almost, has been around understanding that people live in cities. About half the human population today lives in a city, that cities are getting bigger and bigger. I mean, we're living through the largest urban migration in human history. And I think it's the World Bank that predicts or forecasts that in the next 25 to 30 years, the urban population is going to double. And so we're going to go from 4 billion to 8 billion urban dwellers. So cities are going to be even bigger and more numerous and more dense. And so when you think about making a city sustainable, well, you've got power, water, and sewage as sort of core requirements, and communication, right? But you also have mobility. And mobility is an ability to move is how you produce opportunity and how you connect to opportunity and create economic wealth and social opportunity. Like it's just how, moving labor and goods is how economies are built, right? And so mobility within a city is part of the core functionality that a city needs to survive, but also to provide access to opportunity for its citizens. And I think that, or I know that the mobility solutions today are, funnily enough, all based on the concept of interruption. You stop at traffic lights, you stop at stoplights, you stop at pedestrian crossings, you stop when you merge, you stop at intersections, and so on and so on and so on. Even trains, a metro system, which is on its own railroad, right, its own guideway, even that stops at every single station. And so we have based our society on an interruption based mobility system, and that doesn't scale. In fact, it degrades. The more people who you cram on the road, the worse congestion gets. You get into gridlock, and then nobody moves, right? And so I wanted to solve that because I've learned by living in different cities around the world that access to mobility is really access to opportunity, or said differently, where you can get to defines who you can become. And when you can't get to somewhere, your opportunities start to shrink economically and socially, right? A job that's a great job, but that's 3 hours away and 4 bus transfers is not a real job opportunity. Or a school or a hospital that is many hours away isn't really care or education that's accessible. And so I wanted to provide a way or improve the way that people can move in cities in a way that was scalable and sustainable. Um, and when I looked at mobility systems, whether it's an on-road mobility system that where we have traffic congestion, well, that's not going to scale. And trains kind of work. Trains, metro systems move a lot of people, but they're so expensive to build and they lose money economically. So they're so expensive to operate that they don't scale either. That's why only a few hundred cities on Earth out of a population of thousands even have a train system. So we need something new. There's a gap in the market. And that gap I thought can be filled. And if you think about the last 100 years of mobility or even more, and you say, okay, well, if we based everything on an interruption based paradigm, which doesn't scale, well, what's the opposite of that? Well, it's a flow-based paradigm where you flow, you move. And then you start to think about something really amazing, which is actually for the last several hundred years, flow in cities has been scarce. We have lived in a scarcity of flow. Well, what if flow was abundant? What would that look like? What would cities look like? Where the question isn't, gosh, can I get there? How much does it cost? How much time does it take? I have to leave early because I don't know how much time it's going to take. The question becomes, when do I want to be there? And where do I want to go? And so that's out of that idea came flow networks, and Glydways builds flow networks, which is a mobility system designed purely for movement instead of interruption. And the way it works is that every passenger, rather than getting on a bus or a train, every passenger gets their own vehicle that they hail on demand, like a taxi or an Uber, and that vehicle gets you there exactly where you want to go without ever stopping, without ever slowing down, without ever having to transfer. And in that system, and I'll describe how it works in a minute, but that system gives much greater capacity throughput in terms of how many people you can move at a fraction of the space and a fraction of the cost. And because it's a system, not a collection of vehicles, the economics are sustainable and scalable. And that's why we're now very happy to say that we're being deployed around the world for that reason. And so what we've been able to do is to take this thought of an autonomous vehicle, which is an amazing piece of technology, really, truly, an autonomous car, self-driving car is it's still magical. But autonomous vehicles like robo-taxis that are stuck in a traffic jam are just a car stuck in traffic. There's nothing new. You're actually making congestion worse when you deploy hundreds or even thousands of robo-taxis on congested streets because a lot of them are empty looking for new passengers. So you're actually using a very valuable space. We call that AV 1.0, and we think the autonomous vehicle is never the end goal. It's just a stepping stone to AV 2.0, where you take that autonomous vehicle that's highly constrained on public roads and put it on a purpose-built network designed for flow, unconstrained, and then everything changes. Your experience goes up, your capacity, your throughput goes up by orders of magnitude, cost comes down, space requirement comes down, and that's when magic happens. And so that's the path, long story short, to your question of how I got into it and what we're trying to do.
Your vision is so inspiring. I can't even imagine like the complexity of the scale of problem you're dealing with it. What were some technical hurdles you had to overcome to arrive to the solution?
That's a great question. Luckily, and uh, uh, this may sound strange to you or to some of your viewers and listeners, but I think it's actually a pretty good part of the story, which is that a flow-based system, a flow-based mobility system, a flow network, the fundamentals of the technology that make it work and the principles behind a continuous movement system that relies on small vehicles instead of big trains and yet still moves more people at a fraction of the cost. The idea for that was actually invented before you or I were ever born. Probably most of your viewers and listeners are young enough that this idea was talked about, theorized, and even attempted starting in the late 1950s and early 60s. It had a different name back then. It was called PRT, Personal Rapid Transit. It's a version of what we're doing. Not exactly, but it's pretty close, where the idea was we need to build a scalable mobility system that can scale not just to meet mobility demand in a city, but can scale to meet cities, all cities around the world, economically scalable, physically scalable. And the idea was to move away from big heavy trains to small vehicles and coordinate those vehicles in such a way that you can achieve a great personal ride and really high capacity and really low costs in less space. And so the idea was invented around then, late 1950s, early 1960s, and it was attempted by a lot of companies. American companies like Boeing tried it, Raytheon. There's a couple French companies and a few British companies that over the decades have tried to do this. Because if you can get this right, not only can you affect cities around the world, but you can make a lot of value out of it too. You can really improve lives and economies through this. So there's a real good reason to do it. None of them worked. None of them worked because the technical problem was really hard. And simply put, what you have to do is you have to take a self-driving car, an autonomous vehicle, and you have to put it on a bespoke network where the network is managed and controlled with AI, but fundamentally computationally controlled and managed, such that all vehicles are very carefully managed so they never stop. They're always deconflicted from each other. They operate at close headways but maintain high levels of safety and deliver on-demand service with offline embarkation. And the technologies just didn't exist until very recently. I mean, autonomous vehicles are somewhat of a new technology over the last 10 or 20 years, depending on how far back you look. Certainly the electric vehicle is a commoditized phenomenon also of the last maybe 15, 20 years. AI compute is something that's fairly new. The communication tools, radios, protocols, hardware and software is kind of new. And all those technologies have kind of come together, not just technically, but also commercially. I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, such that this system is now possible. And so what we've been able to do is say these ideas that were formulated over the last 50, 60, maybe even 70 years, we can stand on the shoulders of those giants to really bring this vision to life now. It's really about timing. And what I mean by that is if you break a flow network down, you have three elements. There's three parts of it. There's the vehicle, which is electric and autonomous. You have the infrastructure the vehicles operate, which are just lanes. There's pavement. There's no track. There's no wires. There's no power. It's just very simple road. We know roads very well. Ours are very small. They're only 6 feet wide, 2 meters wide. They can be on the ground. They can be elevated. They can be underground. They can be a combination, but they're just roads. We like to think of them as bicycle lanes because that's basically what they are. And so that's the second thing, autonomous vehicles that are electric, the infrastructure they operate on, and the software, the operating system that controls it. We call it Glydways OS, the Glydways operating system, but it's ultimately just software. And so if we look at the vehicle for a second, we are now able for the first time to have an electric vehicle that is fully autonomous and fully safety certified to SIL level 4, which is required for public service of one kind or another where the public can access it. The hardware for that vehicle is commoditized. Electric powertrains are now fairly commoditized. Lots of car companies around the world build EVs, high end, low end, mid end. So the batteries, the motors, the controllers, the chargers, commoditized. So that's great. Autonomy is new, but closed road autonomy, which is what we do, that's fairly well understood. And we designed, this is pretty neat. Back 10 years ago when we were theorizing how to design Glydways, we challenged ourselves by constraining ourselves to say, can we design an autonomous vehicle that does all these things only using off-the-shelf automotive components rather than saying we're going to build a Christmas tree of spinning sensors on the roof of my car that are all custom and very expensive and bespoke. We didn't want to do that because that's not scalable. The automotive compute and the adaptive cruise control systems and the cameras and all these things, they now exist in a commodity fashion to deliver the autonomy that we need with off-the-shelf components. So the vehicle, for the first time, can be built entirely from established commodity component automotive supply chains. That's new. So, okay, that's one. Sure, bike lanes are bike lanes. They're pretty well understood. You can build them anywhere you want. So, okay. And then software is inherently scalable. And as long as it works and it's safe, which you can test and build, then it's scalable. So for the first time, we're able to bring these three elements together in a way that functionally worked, which is sort of the first step, but also worked with the safety requirements that are really, really high for being able to move the public on these systems, and with supply chains that are both economical, as in not very expensive components, and supply chains that are diversified and spread out globally, both in manufacturing and the components themselves. And so we're kind of at a unique place in the world in history where over the last 10 years, maybe 5 years, depending on how far back you want to go, this vision, this dream of this scalable, futuristic mobility system that's the best of all worlds, private ride, throughput of a metro system, cost of a bus fare, all of that is now possible in a way that's adoptable and scalable and safe. And so we just came at the right time. And, we had to make a bet as an entrepreneur that some of the technologies will be ready by the time we need it. And so a lot of things we just got lucky on, and some of it was predicted. And that's how we got here.
There's so many moving parts from hardware, software, compliance, logistics. You talked about bets. What were some bets you took that didn't work out, like an experiments or some choices you had to make?
There's a long list. There's a long list. In the context of Glydways, what I would say is that there are two. One of them is that we made the bet or the belief that a system like ours, which is brand new, it's counterintuitive, right? It's how can it be smaller and cheaper and move more people in less space? Like when we think of moving lots of people, we think of big vehicles like a bus or a train, and now we're talking about little vehicles. How can a bunch of little vehicles move as many people as a train? All those kinds of thoughts. So because it's new, and counterintuitive, we thought it would be really hard to sell, as in to get people who are in the either in the public sector, like in governments, to say this makes sense as a urban mobility system, or in the private sector, because we have customers that do both, right? Small customers and big customers, private and public. We thought it'd be hard to sell. And actually that turned out not to be the case. It turns out that most cities we talk with, transit agencies, governments, are having a hard time with the tools they have available. And the tools are really cars, buses, and trains. There really isn't much else. And they're not great solutions. They're either not great because people don't want to use them because the experience isn't great, the capacity isn't there, or more often than not, the economics certainly aren't there, right? Trains cost a lot of money to build and you have to subsidize them because they operationally lose money. And so when we came to the table with a new tool, which is how we think about it, we think we're a tool of ourselves as a tool for city planners and transit agencies and governments, but also for citizens, private developers, airports, and all those kinds of things. When we came up together with a new tool, everyone, I think almost everyone, maybe everyone, said this sounds fantastic. I need to see it. Like I'm happy to, I want to buy it, I want to adopt it, but show it to me and build it and prove it and risk for it. And so that was great, but that was also a surprise because now we need to focus on not selling the product but demonstrating it as quickly as possible. And I'll get to the next bet. Um, that I got a little. I think we may have gotten a little bit wrong. Maybe we just got the timing wrong. It's probably more of a a timing question, which is that when we were starting Glydways, it was at a time when autonomous vehicles were coming up or being worked on and being talked about, which is great because we use autonomous vehicles. So this is fantastic. We're kind of coming in at the right time. But what was surprising to us was that the general thinking, at least where we were in the circles we were talking about, was that autonomous vehicles, when they were deployed, would somehow solve traffic. That the autonomous vehicle instead of the human-driven vehicle will solve everything. Which is strange because when you think about it, the system is the issue, not the vehicle, right? Because you still have to stop an autonomous vehicle if someone wants to cross the road at a pedestrian crossing, right? And it's a different way of saying our infrastructure, our road systems are based on interruption. And whether you replace the human driver or not, you're still interrupting the flow of traffic at traffic lights and pedestrian crossings, and you're sharing the road with garbage trucks and delivery trucks and fire trucks and on and on and on and on and on. And just making a car a human-driven car, computer-driven car versus human doesn't solve that problem. So that's why we call that AV 1.0. But what was surprising was that many people had this hope and this belief that the autonomous vehicle would solve all those problems. And so why would I need to take the autonomous vehicle and put it on a purpose-built network designed for flow? That idea was much more difficult for people to accept. And in fact, in some of the first couple of years of conversations with investors or partners, strategic partners, we got laughed out of the room, like literally laughed out of the room. You're completely crazy. And this will never work, or it's just not needed. We have roads. The car is the problem, not the infrastructure. And when that happens, you think about ways to connect with that skepticism. So one example of how we framed the argument was to say, hey, let's talk about the internet, right? the internet's been around 30 or 40 years, something like that. And the internet is a revolutionary, amazing technology. I mean, you and I are talking on the internet, right? Everything is made possible through the internet. New economies, new products, truly revolutionary. But when the internet was first deployed or available, we access it through dial-up modems, right? Where we are accessing the internet through copper wires that were designed for human voice, not for high data. And so the internet kind of worked, but cloud compute wasn't really possible. Streaming movies and video certainly wasn't possible. AI wasn't possible. And so the internet is this revolutionary technology that was constrained, heavily constrained, when it was constrained on an infrastructure platform that was designed for human voice, not for data. But when we moved the internet to a high bandwidth, purpose built network, let's say a fiber optic cable as one example, well, now everything changed. Now the internet can dominate almost all businesses, and you do stream movies and you do cloud compute, and AI is now possible, and so on and so on. And many technologies that are revolutionary go through that kind of a phase. You have the first technology developed version 1.0, where you're taking this new technology, but you're constraining it into the world as it is today, not optimizing it for its full potential. That usually comes later. And the internet went through a while to go from copper wires to fiber optic in that example. And we see autonomous vehicles doing exactly the same thing. You have this amazing new technology, a self-driving car, but when you put it on roads built for human drivers, it's heavily, heavily constrained, which is the why I love the thought that an autonomous car stuck in traffic is just a car stuck in traffic. Or said differently, you can have a supercomputer AI controlled on four wheels, but when it's stuck behind a garbage truck, it's just all that is doesn't do anything for you, right? It doesn't add capacity. It doesn't fix the economics. It's just a car stuck behind the delivery truck or a garbage truck. If you play it out, you understand very quickly what the natural, inevitable end state is, which is that you take AV 1.0 and it becomes AV 2.0, where you take this amazing capacity, this amazing vehicle, this technology, and you put it on a purpose-built network designed for flow, right? Moving people. And that's AV 2.0, which is why to us and to many people we now speak with, the autonomous vehicle was never the end state. It was just a starting point. The end state is, as I said, 2.0, putting that vehicle on a purpose-built network designed for flow. And that's what we are doing. That's what Glydways is. Glydways is AV 2.0. We design flow networks where we take the autonomous vehicle and put it on a purpose-built network designed for flow. Why do we do that? Well, because what is the problem we're solving? We need to move many, many, many amounts of more people, and we need to do it in less space with lower cost. Well, now you can do that on a flow network. And I think you started the intro, Mayor, with this. You're saying some statistics about Glydways, and they're accurate. We can move as many people as a metro. In our case, we can move 10,000 people per hour in a 2 meter wide lane. So we can move many, many, many people in a fraction of the space, but also at 1/10 the cost on the CapEx side. And on the OpEx, it's similarly a fraction of the OpEx, which means that for the first time, and I think about 100 years, don't quote me on that, but I think it's pretty accurate or pretty close, I can sell you a ticket and deliver the ride, and the ticket's low. It's around public transit, mass transit fares, and still have money left over. And that simple idea is so important because that means you have a scalable economic model. And not only can you scale it because you make more money than you spend, you keep some money left over, very basic economics. But now I can attract investors to build out to scale the solution because investors like profitability. And when I have investment money, private capital coming in to deploy and build and scale flow networks, well, now we can scale in perpetuity. We can scale infinitely. We can scale to most cities, if not all cities on Earth, which is what we desperately need. And so all the bits and pieces are now coming into place. So last comment is that, I started out by saying, I think we're at the beginning of a historical shift. And this one, I think, will touch at least half the human race, if not more. I mean, this is a big, big, big deal. And that historical shift is moving from a scarcity of flow, where it's difficult to move in cities, or it's expensive, or it's limited, or it's unpredictable, or unsafe, or all of them. We're moving from a world where there's a scarcity of flow to, for the first time, where we can go to build cities and design cities and live in cities where there's an abundance of flow. And in the same way that when the internet was unconstrained and became fast and purpose built, new economies came up that we never thought of. Banking, AI, so many things that nobody predicted that were just blossomed on this new capability. I can't wait to see what cities will do when you move from a scarcity of flow to an abundance of flow. And it's not about the cities. That's just the architecture. That's what things look like. It's what people will do. What new economies and opportunities will open up? Because at the end of the day, we fundamentally believe that access to mobility is access to opportunity. And so when there's an abundance of flow, cities will be able to provide not just speed and movement and growth, but better access to opportunity for more people.
If you look back into this venture, what has been your most proudest moment?
I mean, there's sort of two ways I think about that. the most some of the moments of pride are when everything comes together. And this is probably true for anybody working on big, complex things with many people where lots of pieces have to come together. That moment when, in our case, we give the first vehicle ride or the vehicles are moving together. There's sort of those milestones where an enormous amount of work, blood, sweat, tears, late nights and weekends have gone into creating this thing. And you're working on a piece of it and someone else is working on another piece of it. And in our case, almost 300 people are on our team and in 8 offices around the world are building all the bits and pieces. And as you mentioned, Mayur, there's a lot of pieces to making this work technically, safely, economically, and so forth. And when they come together and you see something as simple as a door opening and the vehicle moving and then stopping, those simple things are just, they're incredible. But I would even go so far as to say they're life changing. And actually, the first ride I ever took in a glide car, which is what we call our vehicles, glide cars, to me, that was like the first time I flew in an airplane or the first time I took a roller coaster at a theme park because it was a physical experience that was brand new that I've never had before. Imagine the first flight you ever took. Some people took flights as children, they'll never remember, but if you can remember your first flight, that's the first time you flew. I mean, humans aren't designed for flight, but yet we flew. It's magical, right? And you feel forces and experiences you've never experienced before. My first ride in a glide car was a lot like that. And a glide car isn't just, I mean, it's a car in and of itself, nothing special, but it has some unique capabilities like a four-wheel steering system and crabbing and strafing and some other neat little things we do to make the journey more comfortable and so the experience is new. And so when I had my first Glydways experience, it was life-changing. It was that emotional moment that I'll never ever forget. So there's a bunch of those. But actually, you asked what am I the most proud of? And I would say that a company is a collection of people that are focused on the same goal, largely. That's what a company is. And having worked on and contributed to over the last more than 10 years now to a team of such incredible people, talent, I mean, just raw intellectual horsepower and talent and creativity, and bringing them all together and being a part of that group of that company, that group of people trying to solve this problem. It can, at any moment when I'm having a tough day or a frustrating moment, I can pause and just think about that. Like, we have come 10 years, several hundred people are now working on solving this problem, and it's working very well. I would say beautifully. That moment to just be a part of that in a small way is what I'm the most proud of. And that helps me because that's not a thing, it's not a day, it's just sort of a state of pride that I can always fall back on when I don't get enough sleep or when things are a little difficult, which happens from time to time. So, as someone on a team, I love that feeling. It's a wonderful feeling of pride, and it doesn't matter what you do, what your role is. I think that pride is one we are all we've all earned, and anybody who works on a project by yourself or with a team, big, small, complicated, simple, very few people do this. In our case, last thing I'll say is that very few people in their career get to work on something that has the potential to touch half the human population, for example, right? To change the human experience just a little bit. And some people do, but statistically speaking, most people don't have that opportunity or it's rare. And we do. We're working on it. Whether we succeed or not, we should talk next year and the year after that, and we should stay in regular contact. We'll see. But it's a very joyful and prideful thing to do, I think.
I am so curious to know this. You have the vision, and if we are in 2030, as per Mark's vision, how does world look like and the logistics?
Well, luckily 2030 is not that far away and we already have our plans, we already have our customers. So as long as we do our job, by 2030 we should have quite a few flow networks built and operating around the world. Right now we have engagements in North America, Southeast Asia, Singapore, Philippines, Japan, Taiwan, Middle East with a bunch of countries there in India. We're doing a lot of work in India and so on and so forth. And so by 2030, which is just 4 years away, a bunch of those systems should be up and running. So this year, 2026, we're launching 4 customer funded pilots. And we've already launched one. We're about to launch a second one later this month. We're under construction on another one later this year and so forth. So 2027, which is just next year, we're launching our first commercial systems, quite a bunch of them, all next year. And so 27, 28, 2029, 2030, we should just be launching more of these systems in new cities. And the systems we've already launched should be getting bigger because we do a land and expand model where we build a flow network that is maybe this big, and then we add extensions to it, go to more neighborhoods, go to more destinations, and so forth. We're really just expanding the network. And so you should see both of those things happening. Glydway systems, more flow networks existing in cities around the world, hopefully delighting people to the point that they just forget about their commute. Like the best version of our experience is that you focus on other things while you're taking a journey on a flow network. And so you should see that, and we should see existing networks going to phases 2 and 3, and maybe even phase 4, where we just connect more people. And that's what we're really excited about doing. And I think it's not necessarily my vision, it's our vision, it's our collective vision, but it's the vision of our customers. They our prospective customers and existing customers are pushing us to go much faster than we can. Now, that's a great problem to have, but it's still a challenge and it's still a problem. And so we are doing our best to meet the ambitions of our existing customers and our prospective customers. And so I hope in the next 4 years, 5 years, that we will be well on our way to scaling Glydways flow networks globally, because that's what we're doing right now.
Super exciting times. You had 2 exits before. For a founder listening, what would be your piece of advice?
I'm a very simple person, so forgive me. This isn't going to be very, very deep. But when you starting something, a company, it doesn't matter what it is, hardware, software, technology, food, services, whatever it is. In my limited experience, starting a company is the hardest thing you will ever do. And as most of your founders watching or listening will already know, most people will think you will not succeed. And most people will be skeptical of the vision or of your ability to execute the vision. And so with all the difficulties and the headwinds, the negativity in some cases, or vitriol, or just skepticism, or lack of support, whatever it is, the most important thing is that you believe in yourself and you believe in your idea, and that you find and build confidence to persevere all those things. It will be harder than you thought. It will take longer than you think. You will run into predicted difficulties and also unpredicted things that you can't control that'll happen. And it is very easy to give up. It is very easy to surrender. And when it is the hardest, and when most people are asking you or telling you to stop doing what you're doing, that is exactly when you shouldn't. Because true innovation comes out of environments where most people don't believe in it and most people don't believe in you. That's actually a really good signal. If people think you will fail, and people think your idea will fail, that's probably a good signal to suggest you're on the right track or close to it. And so at that point, never give up, never stop believing in yourselves, never let other people talk you down. Let them talk. Just, one of my friends once said, be a duck. A duck has water washes off the back of a duck. Let the negative comments just wash off of you. Just be a duck. Focus on yourself, believe in yourself, and not just your idea, in yourself and your idea. That's probably the most important thing that is challenging, even for me too. I'm not saying that I've mastered this either. Success comes with perseverance, but also luck, and also believing in other people and working with other people. So maintain that belief. And it's hard. It's going to be really, really hard, and it's very lonely. But these are all part of the challenges that, if you're experiencing them, the more difficult and the more lonely, the more likely you're on the right track, which is the signal you should use to absolutely stick with it. Very generic feedback, but it's gotten me to this point.
Definitely motivating. Lastly, how can listeners support you in your mission, and anything you want to share on a closing note?
I would say it like this. This isn't about me or about Glydways, the company that I work at. This is about each other, right? We live in a world, and this is our world. And if you are unhappy with anything about the world, work on fixing it. No one else is going to do it. And if you can apply your skills, your capability, your ingenuity, your energy, your time to solving any one of the problems that you see, and we all see problems before us, and solving it a little bit, even a little bit, if people do that, everyone benefits. And so I would just suggest, advise, coach, propose, whatever language there is, that people do that. And I think that's the most important thing. We have inherited from our prior generation a world that is an amazing place and is going to become even more amazing. And equally, it has a lot of challenges. And we need to clean house, we need to clean up, we need to help. And I think that, without getting too specific, small ideas that help lots of people might be better than really good ideas that help very few. Now, that's not always true, but generally speaking, moving the needle, improving lives just a little bit for a lot of people has an outsized effect. And when you start to think of it that way, it can be awfully inspiring to work on these things. And I think that's people should feel unconstrained to do that.
Thank you, Mark, for being on the show and sharing your journey.
Thank you too. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate that of your listeners too. Thank you all very much. Great questions. And it was a really fun discussion.